You don't forget the moment someone tells you your loyalty has an expiration date. It wasn't the words that hurt most. It was how casually he said them, like I was a broken stapler or a cracked coffee mug. Disposable, replaceable. A line item on a budget that had grown too long. My name is Raymond Tucker. I'm 55 years old, and for 2 decades I gave everything to a logistics company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I wasn't aiming to be rich. I never asked for a corner office. I just wanted a steady paycheck, respect, and maybe, someday, a retirement party with a sheet cake and some lukewarm speeches. But what I got instead was a spreadsheet-driven betrayal. I started at Glenview Logistics when I was 35. Back then, it was a mid-sized operation with old software, squeaky chairs, and a break room that smelled like burnt popcorn and printer toner. I loved it. There was something honest about moving things from one place to another. No spin, no fake smiles, just trucks, routes, and the challenge of keeping promises on time. I wasn't a flashy guy. I showed up early, stayed late when needed, and trained every new hire like they were family. Over time, I moved from floor coordinator to operations lead. Didn't come with a title bump or much of a raise, but I didn't complain. When the company went through its first big software transition, I stayed after hours to help the younger staff troubleshoot. When we lost a big client in 2011, I picked up extra shifts to make sure the warehouse didn't fall behind. I was that guy, the one who never said no. And I think, in some ways, that became the problem. You see, when you always say yes, people forget you had the option to say no. And when you never ask for more, they start believing you don't deserve more. I didn't notice it at first. Little things, like newer hires getting laptops while I still used the shared terminal, my department getting skipped for the annual coffee gift cards. And then the big one, a younger manager with half my experience promoted to regional coordinator, a role I had quietly trained him for. Still, I smiled, said congratulations, because I believed deep down that loyalty meant something. But spreadsheets don't measure loyalty. They measure cost. 3 months before my 20th work anniversary, I was called into a meeting with Rick Dalton, the new division head. He was maybe 38, with a polished MBA tone and a habit of calling everyone buddy. He smiled as I walked in, gestured to a seat, and started talking about efficiencies. "We're restructuring a bit," he said, flipping open a folder with my name on it. Nothing personal, just numbers. Then came the phrase I'll never forget. "You've just become a little too expensive to keep on payroll." 20 years, boiled down to a bottom line. I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just nodded, stood up, and left his office without a word. If I had said anything, it would have been out of anger. But anger fades. Silence echoes. I went home that day and sat in my truck for a full hour, just watching the steering wheel. I wasn't scared. Not yet. What I felt was deeper than fear. It was a kind of grief. I had given more to that job than I had to myself. Missed birthdays, skipped doctor appointments, postponed vacations until next year, for 20 years. And now I was just done. Erased. But grief has stages. And once I moved past the shock, I remembered something my grandfather used to say. They don't know what they've lost till it's gone. And sometimes, not even then. I decided I'd help them find out. I didn't jump into revenge right away. That's not how I'm built. I'm not a plotter, and I sure as hell wasn't trying to bring down a company just to feel better. But I had time now, and a lot of knowledge they didn't appreciate. So I started with what I knew, their weak spots. Glenview Logistics had grown fast, too fast. In their rush to modernize, they'd cut corners, small things at first. Compliance documentation that used to be double-checked was now pushed through with a click. Route scheduling became automated, faster, sure, but with a higher failure rate. And the worst part? No one in operations really understood how it all fit together, except me. See, in logistics, it's not just about moving boxes. It's about anticipating where things go wrong: weather, truck weight limits, dock timing, cross-state regulations. And for years, I'd quietly built a manual system that worked. It wasn't fancy, but it worked because I understood the why, not just the how. Evan, the kid who took my place, was a smart guy, but he relied too much on tech. When a system flagged a problem, he looked confused. When it didn't flag anything, he assumed everything was fine. That's where I saw my opening. One of our longtime vendors, Northbridge Freight, had been working with Glenview for years. They were old school, still used paper logs, hated the new portal system the company had forced on them. A week after I was let go, I called their dispatch manager, Carmen. We'd worked together for over a decade. "Raymond," she said, "heard you retired early." "Not exactly," I replied. "They said I was too expensive." There was a long pause. Then she said, "That's ridiculous." I didn't vent. I didn't beg. I asked her a question. "What if I could help you streamline routes again, privately?" She laughed. "You trying to start something?" "I'm thinking about consulting," I said, and meant it for the first time. "No pressure. But if I help, and it saves you time or money, maybe you throw me a small contract." She agreed. That one conversation changed everything. Within a month, I had 5 vendors, all folks I'd worked with in the past, who now wanted my help. I wasn't under any non-compete. Glenview hadn't even bothered to make me sign one. Big mistake. I started consulting out of my garage, just me, a laptop, a whiteboard, and a folding table. My wife thought I was crazy. But when the first check came in, she stopped asking. Meanwhile, things at Glenview started slipping. Carmen told me they were missing deliveries. Routing conflicts were piling up. Drivers were quitting because of errors in the system, wasted hours, miscommunications, lost bonuses. And the worst part? They had no idea how to fix it. Because the guy who used to fix it, quietly, behind the scenes, was now building a network of people who trusted him more than their own employer. I didn't sabotage anything, didn't hack, didn't leak. All I did was offer something better. And people followed. By month 2, I had a rhythm. Mornings started with strong coffee and client calls, then a few hours of spreadsheet work, optimizing routes, reviewing logs, analyzing the kinds of breakdowns Glenview used to pay me to prevent. Afternoons were for onboarding new clients, troubleshooting driver complaints, and slowly building the system I wished Glenview had listened to. It wasn't flashy. There were no ping-pong tables or startup buzzwords, just real people trying to solve real problems. And something strange happened. I started sleeping better. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up at 3 a.m., worried about someone else's numbers. My knees still ached, and my back reminded me I wasn't 35 anymore, but my mind, it was finally quiet, focused, clear. Word started spreading. Carmen must have told someone at Horizon Freight because their dispatch lead emailed me out of the blue. Then came a small team from Michigan, then another from Kentucky. What I thought might be a side hustle had started turning into something real. By month 4, I filed for an LLC, Tucker Freight Consulting. I wasn't just making ends meet. I was making a living, and on my terms. Still, I never once cold-called Glenview's clients, never went after them directly. But here's the thing about bad management. People talk, drivers talk, dispatchers talk. Even mid-level managers have a beer after work and swap war stories. It didn't take long for folks inside Glenview to start wondering where their stability had gone. And some of them, the ones I used to train, eat lunch with, listen to when they were going through divorces or losing parents, started calling, not out of spite, out of frustration. "Ray, do you have a minute? Can I ask how you used to handle dock delays in Monroe? What system were you using for the interstate cargo prioritization?" I answered every question honestly, and then, eventually, one of them, her name was Jessica, asked something else. "You ever think about expanding?" I paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're good at this. Really good. And I'm tired of being somewhere that doesn't know what it's doing." Jessica was an analyst, sharp, steady, always the one staying late when everyone else left. I had trained her myself years ago. "You want to jump ship?" I asked, half joking. She didn't laugh. "Ray," she said, "I want to work somewhere that actually listens when something's broken." That night, I opened a new folder on my desktop. Phase 2. I didn't want to build another Glenview. I wasn't chasing size. But I was realizing something I hadn't let myself believe before. People trusted me, not because of a title or a logo, because of what I did. So I started looking for a small space, somewhere not too far from home, enough to fit a desk, a few chairs, and maybe a second whiteboard. Jessica came on as my first full-time hire. By the time summer hit, I had a 6-client roster, 3 part-timers, and a garage that looked more like a command center than anything involving lawn tools. We didn't advertise. We didn't pitch. We just fixed problems. Better, faster, and with more context than the big guys. I still remember the day Carmen called me laughing. "Ray," she said, "you didn't hear this from me, but Glenview just offered a bonus to any driver who sticks around more than 90 days. They bleeding out that bad?" "Oh yeah. And guess who they hired to fix it?" "Let me guess. Evan?" She chuckled. "Number A guy from tech. Never worked a route a day in his life." I sighed. That sounded about right. But I didn't gloat. I just added another note to my board. Stay rooted. Stay quiet. Let the work speak. By month 8, something unexpected happened. A Glenview client, not one I had ever worked with directly, reached out. Mid-sized outfit, cross-state produce distribution, big enough to matter, small enough to feel every hiccup. Their numbers were a mess. Late deliveries, lost contracts, driver turnover worse than a fast food chain. They didn't say Glenview by name, but I recognized the signs. "We're looking for someone who understands the old ways," the client said. "Not just dashboards and dashboards of data. Someone who knows how to read a map and a person." That hit me. I didn't give them a pitch. I gave them a warning. "I don't burn bridges," I said. "If you're working with Glenview, I won't interfere." There was a pause. "Raymond," they replied. "We stopped working with them 2 months ago. They couldn't deliver, literally." I said I'd think about it, but inside, I already knew. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was momentum. I took the client, not because I wanted to spite Glenview, but because I knew I could help. They didn't need a pitch deck. They needed results. So I showed them how I'd redesign their routes, adjust for seasonal demand, and create a backup dispatch system that didn't rely solely on automation. The first week, we cut delivery delays by 22%. By the end of the month, they were hitting deadlines they hadn't seen in years, with fewer drivers, less overtime, and almost zero complaints. That client became my anchor. They talked. Other companies listened. And before long, I found myself hiring again. This time, a retired dispatcher I'd worked with back in 2010. Then, a former warehouse lead who'd left Glenview after the new software rollout made his job obsolete. We didn't have titles. We had trust. Everyone I brought in had scars. Most had been pushed out for being too expensive, too traditional, or not tech-savvy enough. But they knew people. They knew patterns. They knew how to make things run when the Wi-Fi cut out or the fancy apps glitched. By the end of the year, we were serving 16 clients across 4 states, and I still hadn't printed a single business card. I heard about Glenview's new hire through the grapevine, a guy from Boston, big tech background, zero logistics experience. He came in swinging, slashed old systems, brought in consultants, launched some AI-powered optimization tool with a slick interface and colorful graphs. The board loved him, but the drivers, not so much. Carmen called me one night, late. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "They rolled out a new scheduling platform last week. It double-booked half the fleet." Damage? 2 contracts lost. 3 drivers walked out. 1 client now wants to renegotiate terms. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about people being treated like outdated code instead of the backbone of an industry. One morning, I got an email from Evan. Yeah, that Evan, the one who'd taken over my position when I was let go. He was polite, professional, said he respected what I was doing, and asked if I'd be open to a call. I agreed. We spoke later that day. "Ray," he said, "I owe you an apology." I was quiet. I didn't know what I didn't know. I thought tech would solve everything. But I've realized the systems were only working because you were behind them. He sounded tired. Not defeated, just humbled. They're bringing in outsiders who don't understand the field. People are scared, burnt out. And honestly, I don't know how much longer I can hold it together. He paused. "Do you ever think about coming back?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Evan, I don't go backward." He sighed. "Didn't think so." "But," I added, "if you ever leave and want to work somewhere that values what you know, you've got my number." He thanked me. And that was the end of it. Or so I thought. 3 weeks later, Evan resigned. And a month after that, Glenview made headlines, for the wrong reasons. A major contract with a pharmaceutical distributor fell through after repeated routing failures. Drivers posted videos on social media showing GPS glitches, supply delays, and communication breakdowns. The company denied everything, but denial doesn't fix invoices. They lost 3 more clients before the quarter closed. That was when Rick Dalton, Mr. Too Expensive himself, reached out. An email, no subject line. Just, "Raymond, would you be open to a conversation?" No pressure, just want to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. No reply, no regrets. Some lessons come with silence. Instead, I did something else. I took my wife Clara to dinner, a real one, not fast food on the way home from a night shift. We sat across from each other in a quiet little place downtown, drank something neither of us could pronounce, and just breathed. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "You're different," she said. "Better or worse?" She smiled. Lighter. I didn't realize how heavy I'd been carrying it all, for years. But when you spend half your life proving your worth to people who refuse to see it, the weight sneaks up on you. Now, I carried nothing, just lessons, and the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge is thriving in peace. The morning after our quiet dinner downtown, I woke up before the sun. Not because I had to, there were no early meetings or delivery issues waiting, but out of long-formed habit. Years of early shifts had trained my body to rise with the dark. But this time was different. There was no urgency, just stillness. I moved through the kitchen slowly, deliberately, boiled water, cracked 2 eggs, and set out toast and coffee. My wife came down a few minutes later, still wrapped in warmth and sleep. She looked surprised but said nothing. We simply sat and ate in quiet, unhurried rhythm. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about who I needed to call, which schedule needed adjusting, or which system might fail next. I was just there, present, whole. Later that morning, a familiar name appeared on my phone. Carmen. Her message was short and direct. There was an industry summit happening next month in Louisville. Logistics leaders, startup founders, old-school freight folks, and a few curious investors. Word was circulating about me, about what we were building. Some were skeptical. Others were curious. A few wanted to see if what we were doing could grow beyond what they called garage scale. That phrase stuck with me. I hadn't been aiming to scale. I hadn't even called it a company, really. It had been a response to being dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated. But maybe, unintentionally, it had become something more. The thought lingered. That week, I sat down with the 3 people I trusted most, not with authority, but with clarity. I laid everything out. What we'd accomplished, where we were stretched thin, and what might come next if we opened the door wider. No speeches, no votes, just reflection. The response wasn't excitement. It was something better, steadiness, measured confidence, the kind of understanding that doesn't need a title to lead. We agreed. If we were to grow, it wouldn't be by chance. It would be on our terms, slowly, intentionally, without selling out what made the work matter in the first place. We began to shape the next chapter, quietly, carefully. We didn't post job ads. We reached out through people we trusted, the kind who had been on the ground, not just behind spreadsheets. Men and women who had been let go not because they were bad at their jobs, but because their jobs had changed faster than the people in charge understood. Within 3 weeks, we welcomed 2 new clients. One was a family-owned trucking outfit in Dayton struggling with turnover and morale. The other, a mid-sized distribution center in Indianapolis, buried under years of disorganization and missed deadlines. Neither wanted consultants. They wanted partners, people who understood the rhythm of freight, people who'd seen docks before dashboards. The problems weren't glamorous, but they were real, and the solutions we offered, rooted in common sense and consistency, began to stick. The work days were long, but the kind of long that felt earned. There were setbacks, but nothing unfamiliar. At night, I still took notes by hand, not because I had to, but because I trusted the act of writing. I kept a growing folder titled Lessons from the Field, where I jotted things we'd fixed, people we'd helped, and moments we almost missed. And every time I walked into our office, now fully renovated, filled with maps and light and quiet conversation, I didn't see staff. I saw survivors. People who had been dismissed, downsized, reshuffled, and yet they were building something that lasted, not loud, not flashy, just real. And I began to wonder if maybe that was the whole point. As fall rolled in, the air took on that quiet edge, cool mornings, earlier sunsets, trees slowly surrendering to rust and gold. The season suited the way life was unfolding. No drama, no rush, just forward motion, one day at a time. By now, the business had grown into something that felt rooted. We weren't chasing growth, but it found us anyway. Not through ads or flashy websites, but through quiet conversations, word of mouth, people passing along a name they trusted. That name was mine, but I knew it belonged to more than just me. Each new client wasn't a victory lap. It was a responsibility. The team had expanded, not by number alone, but in depth. Everyone brought something specific, a kind of memory for details, a gut feeling about what would go wrong before it did, the kind of insight you only earn after years of being ignored and undervalued. We didn't do motivational speeches. We didn't need them. We had purpose. That was enough. One afternoon, as the leaves began to fall and the street outside the office filled with soft wind and quiet footsteps, I looked out the window and realized I didn't miss my old job. Not even a little. I didn't miss the meetings, the cold coffee, the vague praise, or the silent punishments. I didn't miss being useful only when it was convenient for someone else's budget. Most of all, I didn't miss shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's hierarchy. What we had now was better, not perfect, but honest, and that made all the difference. Clients started sending thank you notes. Sometimes it was a short email. Sometimes it was a box of donuts with a note from dispatch. Once, it was a hand-drawn map from a driver who'd finally had a week without a single reroute. These small things meant more than the plaques or titles I'd once imagined earning. Our systems got better, not more complex, just clearer. Our process was built to withstand turnover, outages, even the occasional bad week. We weren't trying to impress anyone. We were trying to last. There were days when we hit limits, when someone was out sick and a project slipped, when a supplier ghosted us or a plan fell short. But even then, no one panicked. Because failure didn't mean collapse anymore. It just meant we'd try again. Better. In the evenings, I sometimes sat on the back porch with a notebook and pen, not planning, just recording what worked, what didn't, who showed up when it counted, what I'd never allow again if I ever forgot how far we'd come. And slowly, something shifted inside me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The anger had burned out, replaced by something quieter. Not forgiveness exactly, but distance. The kind of emotional space that makes peace possible, even if the past remains unchanged. I had stopped needing to prove anyone wrong. Now, I was just focused on proving something right. The holidays approached. Snow dusted the edges of rooftops. We organized a small gathering. Nothing big, just our team, a few families, a potluck table, mismatched chairs, and laughter that came without prompting. At one point, I stepped back and watched them, people who had once been told they were too slow, too old, too quiet, too behind, now leading projects, mentoring others, carrying confidence they hadn't been given but had earned. There was no toast, no big speech, just a moment where I realized we had already become what I used to dream about. Not a company with prestige, but a place with heart. That night, after everyone had gone home, I walked through the office one last time. The lights were dimmed. Desks were messy in a lived-in way. Papers scattered, coffee mugs left behind, jackets slung over chairs. It wasn't the kind of place you read about in magazines, but it was real, and it was ours. On the way out, I turned off the lights, locked the door, and stood for a minute under the cold sky. There was no fanfare, no cameras, no applause, just quiet. And in that quiet, I finally understood what I'd built. Not a business, not revenge, but dignity. Returned to the people who'd almost forgotten they deserved it, including me.